All right, guys, got another cool watch here from my buddy Doug that he picked up from Noman Watches. This is the spb083J1 using the caliber 6R15 movement. I think its counterpart would be the sbdc065, if I'm not mistaken. And the big difference, I didn't mention it in the video about this guy here, the reduced 200, but this one has a 6R35. The main thing that most people are going to know about as far as the difference between the 6R35 versus the 6R15 is this is 50-hour power reserve, the 15, and the 35 has a 70-hour power reserve. So 20-hour bump in power reserve. There is some other differences in the movement, but I'm not going to geek out on that stuff. All right, let's get into the case size. This one is a little bit bigger. This is the more traditional one that was released and not the reduced now. So 43.75 is the case width. I didn't measure let's just measure the bezel real quick because I did it on the other one. 40.8 on the bezel, so a little bit wider on the bezel. So 43.75, a 50 lug to lug, drilled lugs of course, only 13.26 millimeter thick. That's to the top of the sapphire crystal. 20 millimeter lug width, bracelet tapers down to 18. The bracelets on these are the same, and they both have DiaShield coating on them. So center section's fully milled out, stamped clasp, 4 micro joust, double pushers, oversized fold over. No, this one does not have the oversize. So the clasp is different on this one as well. This clasp is more the traditional one, which is totally fine. I actually do slightly prefer the larger fold over clasp on that newer bracelet, but this one's still plenty sufficient. 7 millimeter crown on this guy, and weighing in fully linked up is 185 gram. So let's pop it on wrist real quick, and then we'll take up some close-ups. I'm going to do things out of order a little bit, just because why the heck not? So here it is on my 7 1/4 inch wrist. Seiko divers with the offset crown, cushion case. I mean, they're just, I've said it before, guys, they just feel at home on wrist, regardless of your wrist size. I mean, this thing just kind of melts into your wrist. It's perfect. I'm a little torn now that I'm putting this one on, because I said before I'd like to reduce a little bit more, but being that they're essentially the same thickness, this one on the right being a little bit larger kind of spreads that out a little bit more, so it feels more planted on wrist. And then not that 13.3 millimeter is very thick, but when you condense the size of the case down, it makes it feel taller, even though it's not. It's hard to explain until you get it on wrist, but they're both fine, don't get me wrong. But I think I would probably still side with maybe the smaller one, but I could wear this no problem. But I can pull off the 50 lug to lug. So screw down crown, obviously 200 meter water resist, 120 click bezel, standard Seiko affair there. That is not, I don't think that's ceramic. That's some sort of coated metal they do, I think. Everything seems to line up on this one. A little more challenging to line things up when you do it this old school way, like you did on the SKX and everything. On this newer one, it uses more of a riot, and then the printing's right on the dial. Where this one, they have to make it so that the chapter ring lines up with everything, and then also the bezel. So there's, it's a little more challenging in the quality control department if the engineering side of things didn't make the parts so that they only fit in one position, and then the printing, there's no deviation, versus just doing it this way. So totally different look, but if we want good quality control and they're having a hard time, producing that with this style, then just do this, guys. I'd rather have that look, even if this is the look you prefer, but deal with the quality control issues, if that makes sense. So totally different handset on this one too. A little more visible, I guess, and less nice looking. Not that they're bad looking, they're just a little more toolish, I guess, because they're more focused on quick visual time. You can see nice applied looking indices, even though they're pressed. A printed framed date window there at 3 o'clock, and then that massive hour arrow hand there. Kind of a satin silver finish around those, with the tail ends of them being completely blacked out. Even the second hand with a lollipop is all blacked out. And then that blue dial, like you would think just the way I'm holding it, that it's the light that's producing it there. But if you turn it, like you can see it still kind of stays in that north-south position there. So you can see it's darker towards the edges, and that's just the way it goes. So it's still radiant, but it is like deep dark blue off to the sides, and it's more focused with the blue down through the center of the watch. Still a great looking watch. Sapphire crystal, of course. You can see the case is fully polished, and then just kind of, well, except for the top here is brushed, but the fully polished sides, and there's no break in it like the reduced. Here it is next to the SKX. Quite a bit bigger, lug to lug certainly. Case width, it's pretty close. But much more premium look and feel to it, for sure. And the crown's a little bit larger too on this one, so 7mm versus 6.5 on the reduced. The reduced is just, I mean, in every dimension is just a little bit smaller. Even the dial size is a little bit smaller. And the bezel. But then the bezel insert on this is like wider, so totally different visual effect on these. But the lume is actually better on this guy than the reduced and the SKX, though. I did already prove that. Price on these at Noman are $1,020. So on the used market, expect to get it for cheaper if you're a used shopper, which I know you guys, a lot of the serial flippers are. Some of us are suckers when we buy new and ended up taking the flipper tax bath. But here's the lume shot. You can see super bright. Here's the reduced, a little less bright. And then here is the SKX. Pretty much on par with the reduced, but the original mm200 definitely the brightest. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next vid.